Hey there, it's me, Eli. I'm going to caption that myself, so it's going to be spelt right. Otherwise, it most definitely would not be. I just want to tell you that this is like the fourth time I'm making this video today because I'm really trying to make sure that it has captions for the different types of people in this potential audience. So here I am in my house, which I am so grateful to have. Here in Brooklyn in New York City. Today's Gregorian calendar date is Friday the 13th of the year that we call 2020, that we call a year. And I'm thinking about the ways in which the tools that I am lucky to have available to me are leading me to think about the current situation. Oh, here's Ruby. That other people may not be using or employing right now, as so much panic fills our collective body. And I was just thinking about the ways in which I could use this as an opportunity to communicate with my community and with other people, and potentially to provide a sort of service, even from my house, as long as we have the gift of the platforms that are currently available to us. If you are at home today, I say hello to you. I reach across the ether. If you're at work today, I give gratitude to you, whether you are there because of precariousness that doesn't allow you to take off of work, or whether you are there because you are in a critical service position in hospitals or in other jobs that are so sorely needed right now. Thank you so much. You are all doing such a great service right now, and not thinking about, or being able to think about, your own needs today first. So I'm sorry, now I'm like petting my cat while I'm talking to you. My cat is over here. That's Ruby. So the first thing that I wanted to say is just sort of a quick introduction to the idea of sort of a speculative solidarity. And so when I think about speculative thinking, to me, that is the type of thinking that allows us to utilize the tools and language and ideas available to us, but in ways that are not yet employed, right? So it means that we're like utilizing the current to go into the future and consider potentials that we could shift into, or that we might imagine shifting into, whether it was done agentively or not. So a speculative solidarity in a time like this means that I'm thinking about ways that we can think collectively and independently in this moment about forms of solidarity, community formation, networking, kinship, mutual aid, support, and how we might transform this moment into one wherein we are able to rebuild and shift into something different during and after this crisis. I see it as potentially a great gift that only something of this scale might allow at this time. So today's episode, which I'm going to try to make a bunch of these, is called Breaking Up with Capitalism and Relanguaging for Revolution. So the first part, Breaking Up with Capitalism, has to do really more with not only capitalism, but it uses the sort of like idea of a breakup or idea of a relationship as something that we are all in with the sort of systems at play in our world. And just as you might do if you were in a relationship with a partner or a family member or a friend or a boss, hopefully you had the power to do that, that you found to be abusive, or that you found someone else was in that kind of abusive relationship, we might say to ourselves, hey, like, I have to get myself out of this, #boundaries, #self-care. And many of us, unfortunately, are not able to do that, even in relationships, for a variety of reasons having to do with trauma. And that's a whole other conversation. But in terms of the systems of financial, the ways finances and power and the body often work together in tandem in our world, which we could frame as being specifically something that has to do with capitalism, right? Which is like the mode of which money and labor happens in this particular system. If we think about that, we can think about being in what is essentially an abusive relationship, a relationship that gaslights, a relationship that attempts to control not only your understanding of yourself, but of your world, etc., as being only one that holds its logic as opposed to presenting its logic to you as one of a choice of many, right? So the way that this becomes so institutionally pervasive is through media, through school, through any form in which you get your language, right? So language becomes the channel by which the body begins to be inscribed by the logic of this system. That may not make a lot of sense, but hopefully I'm gonna like break it down for you in a way that works. So when newspapers or or media or things that fly around on social media, videos, etc., movies, stories, etc., use language that comes from a capitalist understanding, and we hear it again and again, and we're not really offered alternatives, we start to think that those things just are the world, instead of understanding that those things come from a source and that they aren't fixed. And yet we have heard them so often, and there's so much the logic that pervades every different way that we learn and think and act and operate, and the ways that other people do that and mirror it back to us, that it's hard for us to kind of recognize that this is something that's actually been created, right? Monetary systems have also been created, etc. The way that they work, land ownership, the idea that one person has more than another and is able to have access to something someone else isn't. This is a system that we did actually produce. And so I wanted to sort of start us out with this idea of like what it would mean to break up from capitalism. And of course, like in operation, that's very difficult for so many of us who are precarious, meaning that we don't have enough resources to free ourselves from the cycle of labor or the cycle of finances that we find ourselves in, the cycles of debt, etc. However, I think that there is a way to conceptually, intellectually, and ideologically free ourselves and our bodies as well from capitalism. And that starts to be some of the speculative work that we can start doing. And it starts to help you step back almost in the way that you try to do in meditation, where you're like actually kind of outside your relationship with capital or with the systems that you're in, looking at it as opposed to just being in it and having it act upon you as an unwitting body. So the first thing that I wanted to kind of like, I say the first thing, I've already been talking for 8 minutes, but that is just where we are. So I wanted to bring up this idea or sort of framework from that Silvia Federici uses, I think, in a very interesting and useful way. This is from Federici's book, Caliban and the Witch. I think it's published by Otana Media. I don't have it with me right now because it's in my office where I teach. But the idea, and this is in a chapter about how the body starts to be controlled, is that the body is capitalism's first machine before the clock or the printing press. And what does she mean by that? So what Federici is talking about is that in the shift in Western Europe from a place where she's talking specifically about Western Europe, and I don't have the capacity to make this evaluation in every place, but I can say that a lot of what happened in Western capitalism was then exported. It's short. Okay. So what's happening in Western Europe at the time that Federici is particularly interested in is that there is a move from sort of a commons ownership of land and also sort of commons intelligence, right? So plant medicine, community ways of healing and sharing goods, resources, land, healing, kinship networks, etc., and removing that from kind of a commons holding into a place of vilifying different ways of operating against the modes of sort of now top-down land ownership, the prediction of a labor force wherein the body is now laboring for someone else. And in order to provide yourself with resources, you need to labor for a certain amount of time in order, or for a certain amount of productivity in order to gain the resources that you need in order to survive, right? So the move, this move was actually one that people did not participate in willingly. And so this whole process took place wherein people had to be really convinced and forced and coerced, and often violently, into allowing themselves to become what is like a labor body, which like we talk about as sort of like a biopolitics, which has to do with like the political relationship to the body. So we get moved into this biopolitical state where the peasantry and people who have had their own relationship to the land and their own relationship to resources and to their time and the way that what they do with their bodies and how they, interact with their world, there was a lot of resistance, obviously. And so what happened was there was a process of like creating all of this literature, all of this narrative around sort of like the evil of the body and the ways in which like people who were working with plant medicines were actually anti the church, right? And so it's like a church and state attack on these old ways of being, right? And so when we talk about the body being capitalism's first machine, we talk about it as sort of like this process by which we convinced ourselves that the body was this laboring body, and also that we needed to ignore what was happening in the body in order to be our best selves, right? And so this continues on through Cartesian thinking, Descartes and other philosophers, where in Western philosophy starts to be a space in which the sort of subjugation of the body and repression of its urges and repression of its needs becomes synonymous with sort of the better capacities of the mind, which was erroneously, as a result, divided from the way that we understood the body for a really long time. And so when we in our own lives are participating in capitalism, we're doing so as part of a long history of the subjugation of the body and its needs, and a sort of dialectic, this kind of divorce and binary thinking that's been set up and passed down to us about how sort of we are weak or not being the best that we can if we aren't actually ignoring the needs of the body in order to participate in the systems of capitalism, i.e. work, i.e. production, i.e. Earning in term to earn your keep, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole problem with this, of course, is that there is no earning your keep without capitalism, right? There is no there is no need for currency in order to acquire food without the system at play, right? And so what is so important is part of it is like, how are we languaging ourselves, right? So how can we use language as a way to start moving us out of this ideological trap that we're in with capitalism? How can we use kind of like speculative thinking as well as just kind of like a self-hacking mechanism for changing the way that we talk about ourselves, our lives, and other people, so that we can start to like really hold on to these fissures and break them and start to see how much this has a hold on us, right? And so as we take time right now to consider what it means to care for ourselves and others in a time of great disruption and illness, right? And when we see the systems of capitalism are so deeply broken, the institutions are so deeply broken that in New York City, we can't close the public schools, or they're saying you can't close the public schools because we can't feed the homeless children that rely on them, or where other work is having a slowdown and people are being asked to work from home as opposed to just resting or taking time to care for their families and set up contingency plans, because so essential is the idea that capitalism moves forward to the idea of our ability to care for ourselves, it's all, visualized in this system where like money comes down because we work, as opposed to there being resources that are actually not connected to work, right? And so some of the ways that I have been sort of watching this play out in my own community are these, right? So what does it mean to consider yourself to be doing a thing that is not working, right? What is that state? If you can only consider what is happening when you're not working to be in relationship to work, then this is kind of a hint that you've gotten sort of sucked in by this ideology, right? A very similar is sort of the idea that if you see a person who is not partnered or coupled as single, the word single, which is in relationship to the not having of a partner, right? As opposed to just being a person. Like it literally, just the personhood doesn't have anything to do with couplehood or with the ways in which we form relationships. And yet the way that we talk about it is about the lack thereof because it's so institutionally normalized. Right. Same thing for the body versus the disabled body or the crip body or the mad body, right? When we use the word normal to talk about an able body with certain characteristics or certain capacities, we create a verbal way of narrating the body that is actually inaccurate. And so when we use these words around labor and we say, like, oh, we're all on vacation. We're not on vacation. This isn't vacation. What does it mean to think about this time as a different time? What does it mean to recognize that the systems are not set up to actually allow everybody to stop working and care for themselves, to stop working and produce networks of emergency strategies for people who will be without homes, people who will be without food, people who will be without connections, elders who will be without people to get in touch with them. If this isn't slowing down, and if, the government is spending its money on bailing out companies and banks instead of giving it to people for, money that was not available, this is a sense of that, like, you are in this model and it does not have to be, right? And so how can we use this moment to kind of like go, whoa, and pull ourselves way back? What does it mean to tell yourself right now, if this came up in my Facebook yesterday, what does it mean if you're at home and you're supposed, right? Even this word, and someone has asked you to work and you don't feel like you can. What does that mean? Are you like getting down on yourself? Are you like, wow, I'm so distracted, I'm so unfocused, right? Those are words that I was hearing. What if it's not distraction? What if it's not lack of focus? What if it is actually the total opposite, which is your body is trying to give you information about where it needs to put its focus, that your world is giving you information about where we collectively need to put our focus, right? What is the purpose right now of moving forward with our jobs, right? Obviously, like, there is a certain type of breakdown that happens if like everyone just anarchically stops laboring. But the point is not to stop doing things in service of ourselves and each other, right? The purpose is to say that the ways that we do that are obviously broken. They've caused the situation. And so to desperately try to fit it into these new modes is not necessarily really what we need right now, right? And so who is going to stand up and say, I need to reconsider what it even means to be in my body? So many people are about to die. They still want you to focus primarily on working for someone else, right? So yeah, that's part one. Who knows what I just said? I have to go back and type it all. I want to talk a little bit, maybe tomorrow or the next time I make a video, about sort of like how you can, like, sort of a speculative somatics, right? How you can be working with your body right now to deal with the very well-founded anxiety that you're undoubtedly having, and I am as well. What you can be doing to stay from feeling isolated, how you can help others in your community that really are at greater risk than you, perhaps, or that if you are someone at great risk, how you can communicate that. We're up to almost a 20-minute video. But just wanted to put this out there. Hopefully it helps someone. I'm thinking of you. I'm thinking of me. I'm thinking of what all of us need. And I'm hoping for a little bit of revolution.